Hello, I'm Jeff Van Treese, and this is Mobilized News. We welcome you to our shows. We have a very special guest today. We have Jean Sue is back with us. Jean is the senior attorney for the Center for Biological Diversity, and she joins us live from Egypt at the United Nations Climate Change Summit, or COP27, 27th COP that we've had, and looking forward to hearing all the latest. So thank you so much for joining us, Jean.
Great. Thanks for having me back, Jeff. Great to see you.
So, do you have any good news to share with us? I'm hoping that, after we've had 26 COPs and not too much to show for it, hopefully COP27 is different. So, if you could give us a little bit of an update on what's going on, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so we're a bit on the precipice of something potentially exciting happen. But we literally are at, the final few hours of COP. They've just decided to extend it for at least one more day. We'll see if it takes 2 more days. But one of the exciting developments here has been this language in the final COP decision text, which is basically a series of commitments that nations are willing to make together. And one of the exciting prospects is language about fossil fuels. So, any 5-year-old can tell you that the culprit of the climate emergency is fossil fuels, and the only way to solve the climate emergency is to stop those fossil fuels. It's pretty elegant and simple. It's not that complicated. Unfortunately, we have politicians that make it extremely complicated. So one of the surprising parts about the Paris Agreement and these climate talks, which have been going on for 3 decades now, is that up until last year, there was never any mention of fossil fuels. No words of fossil fuels, that phrase, in the Paris Agreement whatsoever. There was never a negotiation track that particularly talked about tackling fossil fuels. That changed for the first time last year in Glasgow, when all nations came together and decided that they were okay to commit to the phase out of, the phase down of unabated coal. So that means that we're missing oil and gas from that equation. There was no commitments made on oil and gas. That also means that coal that is, paired with a false solution like carbon capture can still keep being combusted, which is a huge problem. So the breakthrough last year was finally people recognized coal, that coal was a problem for the climate emergency. But the real kind of twist in the story is that India came out. They are a major fossil fuel producer as well as consumer, particularly of coal. And they advocated for a less ambitious statement, but still one that commits to the phase down of unabated oil, gas, and coal. So that gives us the full suite of fossil fuels. Unfortunately, it's still tied to fossil fuels, or it's still tied to false solutions. But at the very least, it recognizes that all fossil fuels are the culprit of the climate emergency and that we need to deal with it. And the most stunning twist of all is that the United States also came out to support India's position. So not the most ambitious position of the EU, but the step below. So still massive loophole of false solutions, but at the same time, the first recognition that we need to phase down oil, gas, and coal. So this is really breakthrough news, even though I'm sure everybody, in the United States is thinking this is obvious. But we've had a global denial of fossil fuels as the driver of climate change. So that's where we are now. One of the big problems that we have is that the final decision to get this into the text is really with the Egyptian government that hosts this COP. So they are the people who have discretion to allow this text in and to also negotiate and foster that type of conversation about fossil fuels. But unfortunately, we have not seen this type of language show up in the draft text, even though this miraculous group of countries are advocating for it and calling out for it in public fora, etc. So what we're waiting with bated breath to see how this plays out in the next 24 to 48 hours is whether we're going to get some language on the full suite of fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal, instead of just coal for Glasgow.